welcome to the greatest footage ever found. An investigative documentary series exploring the mysterious disappearance of movie podcasters David Scandura and Justus Burkitt. I'm your host, Charlie Anwar. In the spring of 2024, David Scandura and Justus Burkitt, the host of a little-known movie podcast, The Greatest Movie Ever Made, set out to record a special themed month of episodes entitled Shaky Cam Summer Camp. These ill-fated episodes, each covering a different found-footage horror film, would be the final ones that these two unfunny jerk-offs would ever record. Following the completion of the final recording, David and Justus vanish without a trace. Through the cooperation of the Podmaster, the enigmatic behind-the-scenes producer of The Greatest Movie Ever Made, I've come into possession of those final recordings. Over the next 4 episodes, I'll be presenting these recordings in their entirety. What you're about to hear is the first of these lost episodes.
I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkitt.
And today we're here to find out, is As Above, So Below the greatest movie ever made?
Hold on, guys. How are we supposed to get 370 feet into the Earth?
The catacombs.
Welcome to The Greatest Movie Ever Made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Shaky Cam Summer Camp 20... Shaky Cam... Fuck. Shaky Cam Summer Camp 2024!
We're leaving all those in.
No, we're not.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Yes, Justus, it is Shaky Cam Summer Camp.
Shaky Cam Summer Camp 2024. We are talking about found footage movies all July on The Greatest Movie Ever Made. This is my mandate month. I am a known enjoyer of the found footage genre, and I am excited to share it with the masses. And by the masses, I mean the 32 people who listen to this show. And also you. Anyway, very, very excited to be doing my mandate month.
Yeah, and you picked an interesting one to start things off with.
Here's the thing. I think we're going to increase in quality over the course of the month, meaning we are starting off with a stinker. I think this movie sucks. We'll talk about it. It's very interesting. This movie, the movie As Above, So Below from 2014, has a reputation in found footage circles as being one of the good ones. Inexplicably, because this movie is not good. I have a theory that this movie is a lot of found footage movies. I think are they appeal very strongly to people who are casual horror fans. I think a lot of people's entry point into horror are found footage movies like Paranormal Activity, right? Or like this movie, As Above, So Below, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't really watch a lot of horror movies, but like I saw the big fucking found footage horror movie that everybody was talking about because it was like so scary or whatever. And I feel like a lot of the positive audience reception that this movie has had, not critical reception, because that was quite bad.
Yes.
Audience reception. The positive audience reception that this has had came from those types of people who just don't watch horror movies very much. And they're like, oh, I got scared twice, so this movie is a good horror movie. And I'm like, incorrect.
Well, Paranormal Activity kind of kicked off the found footage trend of the late 2000s.
Right. The found footage trend 2.0, basically.
Yeah.
And I would argue we're in 3.0 now. I think we've had 3 distinct phases, right? Each with their masterpieces and each with their duds. The first one kind of kicked off by the Blair Witch Project. The second one sort of kicked off by Paranormal Activity. And then I think we're sort of...
probably Cloverfield, I think, as well. Because I know that had a lot of viral interest before it came out. And it's like, and that may have been the first found footage format movie. You know, debatable whether or not that's a horror film. That's probably the first one that I can think of that I saw.
The Cloverfield?
Cloverfield.
Yeah,
The original
yeah.
Cloverfield.
It is definitely I consider Cloverfield a found footage horror movie. It's a found footage monster horror movie, right? Which is different from a lot of found footage horror movies. Most found footage horror movies are either about like cryptids or ghosts is usually the two main things, or demons, right? But the kaiju found footage film is pretty unique to Cloverfield.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think still an untapped well. I think we can definitely get some more mileage out of that concept.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a good idea that is better than the movie Cloverfield.
Yeah.
Which is a movie I don't particularly care for. But yeah, like I think that this movie is sort of planted, in found footage 2.0, right? And I think that this is when a lot of big studios were like, oh, Paranormal Activity was like one of the most profitable movies of all time. It had like no budget and made $1 gazillion. So Universal Studios is like, oh, where's our one of those?
Well, and
you know,
this is directed by Erick Dowdle,
Yeah.
who I didn't realize this, directed the Poughkeepsie Tapes, which is kind of a cult found footage horror movie.
Right.
But kind of more relevant to this like post Paranormal Activity era of found footage. He did Quarantine, which is the American remake of Wreck.
Right.
And I remember everyone fucking talking about Quarantine when it came out.
Yeah. But like what is good about Quarantine, I presume, not having seen the film, owes itself to the Spanish film Wreck, the original, right? And from what I understand, it's more or less a shot-for-shot remake, right? So it's like, you directed a shot-for-shot remake, which is really just copying somebody else's art with people speaking English instead of Spanish. Wreck, a film that I almost picked for this month. I almost had it in the Blair Witch Project slot, but then I decided to just go big and go with Blair Witch. But Wreck is also a movie that I really, really love, and part of that sort of second wave of found footage horror too, Anyway, David, how are you doing?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
I know that's something I've never said before on the show, but I'm good. You and I both had a very long day.
Yes.
Setting up the festival tent for Flagstaff Shakespeare Festival.
Yep.
And work is just work and rehearsal, and trying to live my life is really starting to catch up with me. So I definitely need to slow things down a bit and really take some time for myself, which I have said for the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I've done nothing about it.
You need to request that PTO, you son of a bitch. I keep telling you this.
Yeah.
I've told you this on mic 3 times now.
So I'm going to do it.
Yes, take a PTO, you stupid fuck.
Yeah, I'm good. My media recommendations are the 10-minute version of I Heard It Through the Grapevine by CCR.
Hell yeah.
What a fucking great song.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I agree. I just picked up Cosmos Factory on vinyl.
Oh, hell
day.
yeah.
Yeah, I just like found it at the record store and it was cheap, so I just like grabbed it because I was like, if I have Cosmos Factory, I don't really need that much other CCR in my record collection because all their albums are great, but Cosmos Factory has like most of my favorite songs from them on it. So I'm like, okay, yeah.
At the record store that I used to work at in high school and college, any CD that was used that basically wasn't sealed in shrink wrap, we could just put into the computer and play through the stereo system.
Nice.
So there was a copy of Chronicle, which is like there's like a 20-ish
Yes.
songs greatest hits collection.
My father had that and played it all the time when I was growing up.
Yeah, that's how I got into CCR.
Yeah.
And fucking 7 of the songs on Chronicle are just from Cosmos Factory.
Yep. Yeah.
Like that album is represented the most on that compilation.
It's pretty much a perfect album. I would say like pretty much 10 out of 10 album, no skips. Like every song is great.
Yeah, I
on
finally caved and was like, no, I think this is pretty perfect.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
how are you doing?
I'm also tired for the reasons aforementioned. But I'm good. I'm chilling, you know. I am a little bummed that the Podmaster is going to be away for the weekend. I'll be missing her because we're not separate all that much. So, you know, looking forward to her coming back tomorrow. It's only 24 hours, but that feels like a long time. I don't know. But yeah, I'm good. I'm chilling, and my media recommendation, I guess, is Cosmos Factory. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else. Except A couple weeks ago, you and I and the Podmaster did watch Hausu, the Japanese.
What a good fucking movie.
Yeah, the Japanese like fucking
What
horror
an
comedy
insane
film.
movie.
And we hadn't said anything about it on mic, and I was just thinking about it today too, and I was like, Hausu rocks. So if you haven't watched Hausu, I guess watch Hausu.
Yeah.
Especially because we're talking about a bad movie today. So if you watched this movie and also thought it sucked and need something to cleanse your palate in the form of a good movie, throw on Hausu.
I gave it 5 stars on first viewing.
Yeah.
Which never happens with me. I am a stickler for that kind of stuff, and it normally takes me a while for a movie to really impress me like that. Hausu whips ass.
It rocks.
And the Barnes & Noble Criterion Collection sale's going on right now, so you can scoop up that bitch from Criterion for $20.
Hell yeah. Anyway, yes, listen to CCR and watch Hausu. With that, David.
As above, so below.
As above, so below.
So I there's probably a better episode that we could talk about this, and by that I mean the Blair Witch Project. But talk to me about your history with found footage horror and what you love about it as a subgenre so much.
Yeah.
And then get into maybe your past with this movie a little bit.
Yeah, so I am known as a found footage enjoyer. And that really started in earnest probably in the last couple of years. I don't have a long history with found footage necessarily. I did see the Blair Witch Project probably a good 10, 12 years ago at this point. So I saw Blair Witch not early, but like in my formative years as a film fan, and it made a big impression on me, and I really loved it. Saw Cloverfield in the theaters when it came out, so like found footage has like been sprinkled in my my movie going life, my movie enjoying life. But I really went deep on it in the last couple of years, and I think the one that really kicked off my extreme interest in found footage horror was the Australian film Lake Mungo. The first time I saw Lake Mungo, so I watched Lake Mungo after I'd already seen a couple of recent found footage horror films. When I checked out Lake Mungo, like I had checked out Hell House LLC because I saw people talking about it. Bad movie, but I had a fun time with it. And a couple others. I think I had already seen Paranormal Activity 1 and 2 by that point. Just like caught them on streaming as they popped up there. But Lake Mungo I had heard about because Mike Flanagan, the creator of The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor and Midnight Mass on Netflix, and also the director of several films, right? A couple of King adaptations sprinkled in there. He was talking a shit ton on Twitter for like a day or two about Lake Mungo and how much he loved it. And I was like such a big Flanagan head at the time that I was like, oh, if Mike Flanagan's recommending something and saying that it like reminds him of Twin Peaks, which is another thing I love, I should fucking watch it. And I did. And the way that Lake Mungo uses the found footage like device to tell a story that I don't necessarily think you could tell in a different format. Like I think Lake Mungo works as a found footage mockumentary and not as a narrative film, right? And I was like, oh, I've never seen the found footage device be integral to the success of the story, as opposed to just like a gimmick that the filmmakers are laying on top of an existing kind of horror story.
And I think a film that commits to the found footage premise, that is, if they nail that concept, they've basically that's how you make a good found footage movie,
right?
Is you just commit to that narrative device.
Yes, 100%. And some found footage movies that I've seen that don't do that very well, that try to have their cake and eat it too, like where it's like, oh, we're a found footage movie, but we still want to have like really insane effects work shown fully in frame, like The Taking of Deborah Logan, a movie that I also think is not very good, right? It's like that's when that falls apart, because it's like, I just wish I was seeing this crazy effect that you're showing me with a higher quality camera, right? So it's like, yeah, you have to fully commit to like, yes, this is blurry. These people are behaving like real people and not like characters in a movie. You know, the stuff that is happening is sometimes going to be in frame. It's sometimes going to be like slightly missed by the camera, right? Like all of that stuff has to be like part of the story and the world building. Because if you're just trying to shoot a horror movie on a handheld fucking shitty digital camera, it just looks like a badly shot horror movie, right? Which I think is the issue that a lot of people have with the genre. It's like, well, why wouldn't I watch a movie with better image quality and better camera work?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Lake Mungo really kicked it off for me. And then I just started fucking gobbling up as much found footage as I could, really. There were a few that I had heard about that I dove into after that, being like, oh, maybe I'm interested in found footage, so maybe I should see things like, Creep and Troll Hunter that I had heard about. And then also I just started going through, just mining the depths of Tubi and looking for interesting seeming found footage movies and being like, I haven't seen The Tunnel before, read the premise. Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, it's 82 minutes. I'll throw it on, right? And that's another thing I love about found footage movies is it's really easy to find short ones. So you can go through these things like they're one episode of Stranger Things, right? So like that sort of kicked it off, and I've found some real gems from my deep dive into found footage, like The Outwaters, like Horror in the High Desert, like The Medium, which is a Thai film that, again, we almost talked about this month, and boy, oh boy, is that film fucked up. It's so good. So like there's good shit out there. You just have to be willing to search for it, I think. And that's one of the reasons I like the genre is because it feels like shoveling through a bunch of shit and then occasionally finding like a fucking 24 karat diamond.
and that 24 karat diamond that you occasionally find.
Yeah.
In my experience, I'm not as big as a found footage nut than you are, but like the found footage that I've seen recently is because of you.
Yeah.
And the sign of a good found footage movie for me is one that sticks with you and lingers with you after you saw it.
Yeah.
And gets your brain thinking about things and, stuff like Horror in the High Desert and The Bay and Lake Mungo. Those are movies for me that have really stuck with me after watching them.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not like my favorite movies in the world or anything like that, but they are effective and they use that format effectively. And when I am scared watching a movie or I feel that thing in my chest, it's normally when I'm watching a good found footage movie and someone's walking down the hallway with the camera and you're waiting for whatever's going to jump out at them or whatever thing they're going to find at the end of that hallway. An experience I did not have while watching As Above, So Below.
No, I haven't.
And weirdly enough, I did have it watching Hell House LLC 2, a movie that is far worse than As Above, So Below.
Yes.
But I got out halfway through that movie and I'm like, oh, okay, nothing scary is going to happen.
Yes.
But the first half of that movie, I was like waiting for the thing to happen. Because the first Hell House LLC, again, not a good movie, sort of effective at doing that found footage jump scare thing.
Yes. As effective as the first one is, which it is directly duplicating.
Yeah.
It is very much, Hell House LLC 2 is very much a case of sequel by just direct copy paste. Just, oh yeah, it's the first one again. This movie, so I didn't talk about my history with this movie, but it's not long. It's basically in that spat of found footage films that I digested after watching Lake Mungo and having an interest in the genre. This was one of them because I had heard about it. And I had high expectations because I had heard that it was good. And then I ended up enjoying how dumb and weird it is, but not actually liking it as a movie because I don't think it's good. That's pretty much all I have. And I had only seen it once before this. I hadn't revisited it, but I thought it would be fun to talk about, partially because it's sort of a big name one. Like this one has some buzz around it.
Yeah.
And also because we don't often talk about movies that we dislike.
I do remember hearing about this when it was coming out and having somewhat of an interest in seeing it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Which is not something I can say for like a lot of found footage movies that don't have the words paranormal activity in the title.
Right.
They don't get the kind of release that this thing had.
Yeah. I think so. You already alluded to this. I think you and I are in agreement. This film is not scary.
No.
This is not a scary movie. It is a horror movie. It fails at being frightening at every turn.
There were, and I will call them out when we get to them, there were a couple moments where I was like, that was effectively done. From like an analytical,
right,
completely detached perspective of like, that was a somewhat effective scare. Did it actually trigger an emotional response for me? No.
No, absolutely
But it's
not.
something I can recognize as like, okay, that's something.
Yes,
You're doing
are,
something.
They're playing the right notes. They're just doing it in a way where it doesn't quite land for me. Yeah. Clearly it landed for some people, because some people think this movie is terrifying, which, okay. But yeah. Should we just get into it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, 2 logos that start this movie, Legendary Pictures and Universal Studios, which is insane. It's crazy that this has major studio backing behind it. But like we just said, it's like this was post-Paranormal Activity. Studios are like, hey, what's going to be the next thing that has a tiny budget and makes $1 zillion?
Well, and also, I think we should mention post The Descent.
Oh boy, is this movie post The Descent.
And this is found footage Descent. This
Yes.
is like, we're going to do The Descent, but found footage.
Yes.
Where everyone else was doing their own various versions of Descent that didn't have the found footage aesthetic to it, but
although
they were just
there
like,
I previously mentioned British film The Tunnel.
Yeah.
That is just straight up also found footage of The Descent. So there's
Okay.
other found footage Descent copies. There's a whole genre of cave horror that Neil Marshall just created by making one movie.
yeah.
Anyway, you were saying.
But I think in terms of like the mainstream,
Yeah.
this is probably the king of the found footage Descent ripoffs.
Right, correct. The Descent, much better movie. Neil Marshall's The Descent, horror masterpiece. This movie exists. It came out. You can watch it. Anyway, so yes, we start with an interview of our protagonist, Indiana Jones Jr., but she's a lady and also British. Her name is Scarlett.
Yeah.
And she's talking about how she is, a fucking explorer or whatever. She's like going into these, she wants to get into these tunnels before they fucking demolition them.
Yeah.
This is like somewhere in Iran.
Yeah, a British archaeologist fucking around in a country, taking something that isn't theirs.
Yes.
Once again.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. The British are known for this. Yeah. And so she goes into these tunnels. There's this guy, Reza, who's like helping her get in there. And she's looking for this fucking thing called the Rosetta Key, which ends up being on this big bull that is behind a stone tablet that's thousands of years old that she just smashes a huge hole in. She reads it and she's like, oh, it's behind it. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just fucking British people going and destroying ancient Babylonian artifacts.
It's a big bull statue with
Yeah.
a bunch of languages on it, similar to like the Rosetta Stone. And I think it's like a militant group or something that's demoing this, demolishing these caves.
Yeah.
The demolition goes off, and she and Reza escape, and she sees a vision of someone hanging from a noose.
Yes.
And then in this interview, she reveals that she's following kind of in the footsteps of her father.
My father searched his entire life for this, which is such a throw a dart at a wall ass line of dialogue in a movie. My father searched his entire life for this. Yeah, okay, you and every other fucking protagonist in a poorly written adventure movie. Like,
Yeah, she spends this whole movie with her own version of of Sean Connery's Holy Grail diary from Last Crusade.
I hanged myself, Indy. If only you'd pick up the phone. I wouldn't.
We will talk about the phone, Jesus.
I hung myself, Indiana. I got so depressed I couldn't take it anymore.
I couldn't find the Grail.
Your Connery is big surprise. Your impression is better than
Yes.
mine.
I've also been watching James Bond movies recently.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, part of it is because I accidentally started doing a John Rhys Davies impression because I thought about Indiana Jones, and I was like, oh, John Rhys Davies. He's not Indy's dad. He's Sala. So that was a fuck up on my part.
As
and now
above, so
I
below.
just can't get John Rhys Davies out of my head.
As above, so below could have used a Sala type.
Yes, As Above, So Below could have used a Sala type, although ideally portrayed by an actual Middle Eastern actor and not John Rhys Davies, an Islamophobic person.
Yeah.
Playing an Arab in that movie, which is very interesting. After he said all that shit, I was like, so you do know that, like, one of your biggest roles, other than, like, Gimli, like, basically the reason you have a movie career is because you were portraying an Arab man. But apparently they shouldn't be in Europe.
And then they brought him back for Indiana Jones 5.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah. Whatever.
Whatever.
Anyway.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about this movie. Yeah, so...
Anyway, so she sees this vision of this person hanging. She's talking about how her dad searched all his life to find this shit that she's after. And then she drops a bomb on us, David.
She drops a bomb that will stir something in, I would say, viewers of a certain age,
yes,
of a certain demographic,
Gen Z and millennials,
who read a little book series or watched a little film series called Harry Potter.
Yes,
because this bitch is looking for Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone.
Yes, literally the thing that happens right before the title card is it's like after they demolition the caves. The guy Reza, who was like helping her in the caves, is like, everybody who searches for Flamel's stone ends up dead. Title card, As Above, So Below. And I'm like, you just fucking dropped that the fucking sorcerer's ass stone from fucking Harry Potter is the MacGuffin in this movie. Boom, title card. I'm like... And the balls on this movie, because this is coming out in not only a post-Harry Potter book series world, a post-Harry Potter movie world.
Yeah.
People know about the Philosopher's Stone. I was like, you can't try and make the Philosopher's Stone your movie's thing. That's already that movie's thing. Like, you can't reclaim the Philosopher's Stone. I'm sorry, that turf owns it.
Somehow it made its way to France after the whole... Professor Quirrell Voldemort thing back in Harry Potter 1.
I think the thing about Nicholas Flamel actually being buried in Paris is real, though.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think Nicholas Flamel was indeed French, or at least died there, and was a real guy in like the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
He probably didn't actually have a magic stone that made him immortal, but you know, who am I to say?
But I had to pause the movie and scream, and then that's when I texted you last night. Justus, what the fuck did you make me watch?
It's the most insane choice that I can imagine this movie making. Like, it's just like, let's make the whole movie a MacGuffin hunt for the shit that Harry Potter has to fucking get back from Voldemort when he's on the back of Quirrell's head when he's 11 years old. Like, is she also gonna be like fucking seeing somebody drinking unicorn blood in this? Is she fucking gonna like ride a hippogriff or some shit? I was like, what do you think you're doing? Found footage horror movie. It's bananas. This is also where it becomes very clear by the end of this cold open that the cold open wasn't the only thing that's going to just straight up be Indiana Jones. The whole movie is Indiana Jones.
Well, particularly the first act, and then a little bit towards the like third-ish act is a lot of puzzle solving and dropping references to mythology.
And doing the thing that every Indiana Jones movie does, where the protagonist has to go find someone who has a skill that can help him on his treasure hunt, but they don't want to be reeled back in because you know what happened on our last adventure. And I'm like, it's so much more charming when Harrison Ford does this than this random British actress who I think is fine. You know, like, I'm just like, I love seeing people say like, oh, not again, I don't want to end up in a Turkish prison, to Harrison Ford. When they're saying it to this girl, I'm like, whatever, I don't give a shit what happened in Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, because all these fucking kids look like you know,
they look like Riverdale
20s,
extras.
they look like they're models.
Yes.
It's a little hard to believe that these people have any experience with archaeology.
When they
and
fucking try
adventuring.
to convince us that this fucking Jonas Brothers ass looking motherfucker breaks into churches and fixes church bells for free as his hobby because he's such a cool guy, I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The kind of guy who would do that would look like the Crypt Keeper. Not like this perfect, beautiful little, goatee stubble boy that they have here.
When they're going up the bell tower or whatever to find him, I'm like, he's gonna be jerking off up there.
Man, yeah,
it's gonna be like the lighthouse, and there's gonna be a big viscous glob of cum dripping down in between the floorboards.
Yeah, because the bell is mine. This bell is my wife. Yes.
Yeah. So, what's
his
Lady
name's
Indiana Jones's name?
Oh, Indiana Jones's name is Scarlet.
Scarlet.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and she meets up with
George.
Yes,
who's the guy who fixes the bells.
Yeah, and we know immediately that these two had a thing at one point. It doesn't matter.
One thing that I will say in this movie's favor is you're right, it doesn't matter, and I kind of don't care. However, the chemistry between these two actors, pretty good. Anytime they're doing that thing where they're sort of like intensely talking in each other's faces, I'm like, okay, good chemistry. Like I get that these people are drawn to each other, but there's like some resistance, there's like some tension there. I don't think either of them are great actors, but I was like, yeah, it's nice chemistry showing up on film.
Yeah, I'd say they're passable.
Yeah.
So I literally wrote down, what the fuck is this Indiana Jones shit? At the point when he's like, I don't want to hang out, I don't want to work with you. Just let me, fix my bell tower and jerk off. And she says, I found the rose key.
Yes.
And he says, it was in Iran, wasn't it? Just like in a fucking Indiana Jones movie.
And then he's like, I knew it.
Just like Connery in Last Crusade.
Yes, it is 1,000%.
Through the library and the tomb of Sir Richard, you actually saw him. You actually.
It's exactly that, right? And then they have to.
I wrote it down in my diary, so I didn't have to remember.
And then they break into a museum.
Yeah.
And take Nicholas Flamel's gravestone off a wall
and
light it on fire.
There's stuff written on the back because this is also a National Treasure ripoff.
Yes, yeah. I mean, to be fair, National Treasure is also
Nicholas Flamel's gravestone.
National Treasure is also just an Indiana Jones ripoff.
Sure.
It's all sort of aping the same shit. But yes, yeah, it is very National Treasure where it's like, oh, there's a fucking secret message on the back of Nicholas Flamel's tombstone, which is in ancient Aramaic. Which, even though Scarlet speaks fucking 4 languages that are she's fluent in 4 languages and 2 dead ones or whatever, like she has that whole shit. I love that she gives her resume so that no one can accuse this character of being a Mary Sue. It's like in the interview portion, she's like, I'm the youngest ever person to graduate from Oxford, and I'm fluent in 4 languages, including 2 dead languages, and blah, 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 blah. I'm a black belt in Krav Maga. And it's like, okay, all right, I understand, movie, you don't want anyone mad at you when later she's one-punching demons. It's the Krav Maga, baby. We know she knows how to do it. She set it up. Yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, they... or no, the Rosetta key maybe was the Aramaic. I don't remember.
Yeah, basically what they figure out is the riddles or whatever they find out. Which, one thing I'll say,
yeah,
I really want to give this movie credit.
Yeah,
because it has some fun ideas that it does not execute well.
This is the thing with this movie,
and one of those things is the whole premise of doing like an Indiana Jones inspired adventure found footage horror movie, because that's relatively unique. But one of the enjoyable things about an Indiana Jones movie is when they come across those riddles and they're figuring them out, the audience knows enough about the lore and enough about the references to sort of follow along and kind of figure it out along with Indy.
Yes.
And this movie just speeds through that shit.
Yes.
So basically what they find out, what she theorizes based on this riddle or whatever that she figures out, is that the stone is like 350 feet below his, where they find the gravestone.
Yes. I have a question for you, David.
Yeah.
Why does this Aramaic riddle rhyme in English? George is reading this riddle, and it is like perfect rhyming couplets. And I was like, the whole reason they had to get George is to decode the ancient Aramaic. So this is presumably written as a poem in that language. Why does it rhyme in English?
I don't know, Justus. Are you familiar with ancient Aramaic?
I guess I'm not. So
maybe it does. Maybe
Right.
maybe it rhymes a little bit more like English than you thought.
I guess that's technically possible, but I don't think so. Anyway, so then they're in order to try and figure out how they're gonna get 350 feet below the ground. There's like this moment where fucking George he has the map out, right? And he's like, oh, there were all these cave-ins in the city in these dates, and these streets caved in. And he was like, so basically, oh, Benji's also here. Because this is actually Benji's thing that he calls out. He's the camera guy.
Benji's the camera guy for part of this movie.
Yes. And so Benji points out, as George is talking about this, he's like, well, why would the city cave in those spots if there was nothing underneath it? Like, if it was just solid ground? And George is like, great question, Benji. It's because there's a fucking secret chamber under there, and that's probably where the shit that we're looking for is, right? So they go into a cave tour led by just some French tour guide. Mm-hmm. This movie does take place in Paris, so there are many French people, some of whom we will talk about in detail as they show up later. But as they're going on this cave tour, there's a ghost vagrant who appears and tells them to seek out Le Papillon.
Timothy Chalamet shows up.
Yes. And also,
he's not Timothy Chalamet, but I was like, that's Timothy Chalamet.
He looks like him.
He's just sitting in the fucking dark in these catacombs, like reading something.
Yeah, and they're talking about like where they're gonna how they're gonna get into this like secret closed off part of the catacombs, and he's like, ask the papillon.
So you want to get into the catacombs, eh?
The papillon will take you there. You go find the papillon. He hangs out at this bar, and then he vanishes. And I think the movie wants you to believe that this is some kind of ghost or demon that is trying to lead them to hell, basically.
Well, and I think he's I think when Papillon dies later in the movie, when he gets eaten by a car.
Eaten by an imploding car, yes.
I think the guy in the car that's on fire, I think that's him.
Oh, I didn't really clock that, but I think you're right. Yeah. Good point. And also, you know what I noticed in this scene is that there is a fucking Marble Hornets, the YouTube series reference in this frame of this movie.
Oh, man.
There is a circle with like the X through it in a way that is so clearly the operator symbol from the Marble Hornets YouTube series. And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen a Marble Hornets reference in a motion picture literally ever.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. I was really into Marble Hornets. That's actually another thing that kind of got me into found footage, is I was a big fan of that in like high school.
That makes sense.
So when I watched Lake Mungo and like went full found footage, a lot of it was like I was kind of harkening back to that and getting some nostalgia for that and being like, oh yeah, I've kind of always been into this shit.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, a lot of creepypasta has that kind of found footage vibe, and
I'm very into creepypasta.
Yeah, that's so funny. I can't even remember where I heard of Marble Hornets. Who introduced me to it?
Yeah.
I never actually watched it or got into it, but that's so funny that you clocked that.
Yeah, I clocked it because I've seen the whole series. I was a super fan.
So they go to the club, and I immediately clocked a spooky girl that walks out of the club.
Yes. I mean, the movie wants you to notice her. She basically does like scary ghost stink eye directly at the lens of the camera as she's walking past, and she's like, I am a creepy demon.
and then later in this club scene, which apparently looks like it's just taking place in like some another historical landmark in Paris somewhere.
I guess so.
It's like outside, and there's like stone archways and shit.
Yeah, it's like Roman ruins.
Yeah.
They're just like, yes, this will be the perfect place for the dance club.
so the camera tracks her as she comes out of the club, and then later we also see her walking down the street.
Yes,
and she looks back at the camera. Did you see the ghost in this scene?
I did not.
There's a ghost that flashes on the screen just straight up Lake Mungo style.
Wait. I did see that. It's like while she's walking.
Yeah.
It's like, yes. I did see that.
I don't know who it is, and it never, like, I didn't see any others in the movie, and I don't think it comes back at all.
Yeah.
So, but that was like, oh, that could be cool, and then nothing ever became
nothing
of
is
it.
made of it.
Did you see the ghost? Did you see the ghost? Did you see the ghost? Did you see the ghost?
Yeah, so she walks by the one window, and then Benji is tracking, because Benji has noticed her being creepy and scary.
Mm-hmm.
So she walks by the one window, and then he, like, moves the camera to the next window that she should be walking by right after that, and she doesn't appear in that window. So it's like, oh, she's disappeared, she's a ghost. And then they meet Le Papillon, who is hanging out with a bunch of ladies, trying to have a good night, and they're like, hey, take us down to the catacombs, and he's like, I don't know you, why would you go to the catacomb? Do I look like a tour guide? And Scarlett is like, do I look like a tourist? Very Indiana Jones line of dialogue that would sound way better coming out of Harrison Ford's mouth.
And then they also say secret tunnel.
Secret tunnel.
Secret tunnel through the catacombs. Secret tunnel.
Yes.
So Le Papillon eventually agrees to take them on a tour through the secret tunnels of the catacombs to go find the Philosopher's Stone.
I'm pretty sure Le Papillon means the butterfly. This motherfucker's name is Butterfly.
Yeah, well, there's another guy named the Mole.
Yes.
Le Taupe.
But at least that makes sense if you're a cave explorer.
Yeah.
Butterflies don't explore caves. The fuck is this guy talking about?
But I basically immediately want all of these snail-eating motherfucking French people to die. Because
You didn't like Susie and Zed?
Zed.
Zed, who canonically fucks. We learn that later in the movie.
Yeah.
He's a deadbeat dad of a child who he does not see.
Zed has like 5 lines in this movie, and 2 of them are in this scene where he's like, he's trying to do a Robert De Niro impression, and it's not good. It's not funny or charming.
No.
He's just like, I'm here in this movie.
All he says in his De Niro impression is, fuck, man, fuck. Just in a generic American accent. Yeah.
So they're packing up their gear, and they're like, yeah, well, if your light runs out, you could die. If your rope, and now I'm doing sort of Arnold shit.
That also sounded a little bit like H.R. Giger.
Yeah.
I was wondering if he had rejoined us. As he is known to drop by.
If you go spelunking in the space jockey ship, your rope could snap, or a face hugger could attach itself to your face and rape you.
Or you could be killed by obsidian drill penis. Obsidian drill penis can come out of wall and rape your whole body in half. H.R. Giger probably loved the Paris catacombs. I bet he was fucking obsessed with those
I think he
things.
probably took home decorating tips from
Yes.
the Paris catacombs.
Yes, just seems like very much his vibe. Honestly, if it wasn't impossible because they were built and designed long before he was born, I would wonder if he had a hand in that. It just seems so much like his oeuvre.
Have you seen photos of the very? I think there's a few of them that are around the world. The Giger bars. They're bars that are designed by H.R. Giger.
Yes.
Full of bones.
Yeah. The guy loved bones. Both literal skeleton bones and also erect penises.
Biomechanical bones.
Yes. And anyway, so they go down into the fucking catacombs guided by these French fucks. George doesn't want to go. George doesn't like going underground, and we learn. So Scarlett has been aggressively pressuring George to go underground. She's like, oh, he's coming. And George is like, I'm not coming. I don't want to go down there. Do not make me go down there. And she's like, no, you're coming, right? And it's like, she is being such a fucking asshole to him. And he's like, no means no. George does not want to go. But as they're like going down into the caves, the fucking cops attack and he gets forced into the tunnel.
He just gets fucking bum rushed by this French policeman who's like, stop or I will lash you. And so they have to flee into the catacombs.
Yes. And then we learn that the reason he didn't want to go underground, so he's like freaking the fuck out that he's now in these caves. He's like, what the fuck, right? And I think it's Scarlett talking to Le Papillon, is like, oh yeah, his brother died in a cave when he was young. Like him and his brother were like exploring a cave, and his brother drowned in a cave. And I was like, you fucking dick! Like, Scarlett is such an asshole, because Le Papillon afterwards, he was giving George a little guff too. He apologizes. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I did not know. And I'm like, you shouldn't be apologizing. This fucking piece of shit has been pressuring him to go underground for the last 10 minutes, fully knowing this information. It just immediately, it's the opposite of a save the cat moment for this character.
Yeah.
Where immediately I'm like, this lady fucking sucks.
Well, another tried and true trope of the found footage genre is the insufferable protagonist who insists that everyone continue along this spooky adventure and keep the camera running even as shit's going wrong.
Yes.
And in something like Blair Witch Project with Heather, which we'll talk about,
yes,
it works for the movie.
Yes.
And here it's just like, why?
And in this it just makes her seem like a cold, evil sociopath. You know? Like, the whole time I'm just like, I think she doesn't give a shit if these people die.
Yeah. and they immediately stumble upon a cult of naked people,
a cult of Tilda Swintons
in these catacombs with shit on fire, and the fucking spooky bitch is there.
A wild pack of Tilda Swintons.
And they just walk by and they keep going. And they don't think to turn around and explain to the French police, like, hey, I know we're not supposed to be here, but there's a fucking cult in the catacombs doing some shit.
A cult of Satan worshippers who have their bodies painted entirely white as if they are Immortan Joe's War Boys, singing opera down there.
Singing very well.
Yes, there was a very funny... So there's like one cult member who's like the conductor of the little satanic opera, and it's so funny because exactly when she like moves her hands in the conductor gesture for them to like hit the high note, she then she whips her head directly towards the camera.
It's the spooky bitch from the club.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
You're clocking way more of this shit than I am.
I'm pretty sure that was her.
Yeah. But it's so funny because like she looks at the camera and the diegetic music, which is just this choir singing, is like, whoa! It's such a overly dramatic moment that then comes to nothing because they just walk away. And none of these Satan worshippers show up ever again. They're not important at all.
Yeah.
Which, like, it sort of would be a better movie if it was just them versus this Satan worshipping cult in the Paris catacombs, I think.
Yeah, this movie has a few too many ideas that are all kind of vying for attention.
Yeah.
That I don't think the movie commits enough to any of them. Really.
I agree. If it was Indiana Jones adventure movie where we're looking for the Philosopher's Stone, sure. If it's we're going into Dante Alighieri's hell by way of the Paris catacombs, sure. If it was fucking demon worshipping cult versus group of cave explorers, awesome. But it's all and none of those. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They get to a part of the catacombs where Scarlett wants to go down that tunnel, and Papillon is like, no, that is an evil... They literally say, that is an evil part of the catacombs.
No, that is the forbidden tunnel.
And because they had a friend named
Le
Taupe, who...
the mole.
Yeah, I wonder if he's going to show up.
Nobody has ever seen him since he went into that
evil
tunnel.
People go down the evil tunnel and they don't come back.
I am sure we will not be seeing him in 20 minutes. Yes. But fucking Scarlett really wants to go in the evil tunnel. Papillon's basically like, I'm not helping you go in there. And so he's like, we're taking the long way or we're not doing this at all. And it turns out the long way is crawling on your belly through a bunch of bones.
Yes. Benji gets stuck and eventually makes his way out, but it's kind of a tense moment.
In just a full-on rip-off of a scene from The Descent.
Yeah.
There's a scene in The Descent where someone gets stuck caving, and it's the exact same thing.
So this was shot in the actual Paris catacombs.
Yeah, that's a thing we need to mention.
Yeah, which is interesting and kind of cool.
Yes.
I don't think it ever translates to the screen. I don't think this movie... There are rare moments in this movie that actually achieve the atmosphere and claustrophobia that one would expect from this premise.
Right.
It just doesn't have that atmosphere to it, unlike The Descent, which is
shot on sound stages.
One of the scariest movies ever, and
Yes.
achieves that atmosphere and that claustrophobia so well.
Yeah.
And the other thing that this movie pisses me off the other thing this movie does that fails to capitalize on its premise is before they all go into the catacombs here, we give everyone cameras.
Yeah.
Everyone gets cameras. So now the movie's having its cake and eating it too with the found footage premise, because now we can jump around to different people in different perspectives.
Before, Benji was just the cameraman.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh, yeah, now everybody's the cameraman, and why is this not just a fucking regular narrative film with, like, a actual, non-character camera person, right? Why is this being shot as a found footage film at all at this point? Especially when you're filming in the actual Paris catacombs. It's like, capture that on film, you know? And
Benji, I think, is still the primary cameraman for most of this, but there are definitely points in this movie where people get separated, and the movie just decides, let's go check in with this other group of people.
Yeah.
And it just ends up feeling like this movie just could have been shot like any other movie, and it just bummed me out.
Yeah.
It really squanders its premise and location.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, so Benji gets stuck and then has a panic attack and then gets unstuck. The fucking satanic choir is singing a little bit while he's like having his panic attack, which is like sort of an eerie moment, but it also just comes to nothing. You know?
It just does. They don't go anywhere with it.
Yeah.
I was expecting them to start being chased through the tunnels by this cult.
Right.
Nothing happens.
But basically Benji just gets unstuck and then the tunnel caves in behind them.
Yeah.
And then a thing happens that I do like. There are some things that this movie does that I do enjoy, and one of them is this movie does this multiple times. This is the first time we see it happen, where they, after the tunnel caves in, they look around the room that they have ended up in, and it's the same room that they started from. And I always love fucking geography in horror stories that doesn't make sense. Like, I love a haunted house where you open a door and go into a room that shouldn't be there, or like the haunted location that's like a cabin that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Or speaking of Marble Hornets, they actually do a really great thing with that, where in some of their latter episodes of their like YouTube series, they play a lot with like, oh, you open a door and suddenly you're in the middle of a forest, or like in a tunnel underground. And so I always love that shit in horror. I just love like the disorientation of like locations that don't make sense. And this movie does do that a couple times. And it's like sort of like the thing you were talking about, where intellectually I'm like, okay, interesting and fun choice movie, but I don't feel anything. Like, I don't feel scared by it. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a thing I like to see, I guess. Right?
Yeah, I think I agree. I like that idea a lot. And in the thing that kind of tips them off is Le Papillon has this graffiti tag that he's sprayed throughout the catacombs, and it started to move around in places that don't make sense to him. So we're starting to get the sense that somehow the catacombs are changing.
Yeah, and because they got trapped in the same room again, it's the room with the evil tunnel. So then they just have to go into the evil tunnel because there's no other way to go.
Yeah. But I like that too. It's one of the things that I enjoyed about this movie, but again, I don't think it commits to it very well.
Yeah, it kind of comes to nothing.
And it sucks because like I love in Paul W.S. Anderson's Alien versus Predator, I love that movie takes place in a pyramid in Antarctica that is buried underground and keeps changing. That is so fucking cool.
Yeah.
I would love to see another horror movie kind of take that premise, and this sort of does, but doesn't quite
commit to it enough.
It doesn't quite do it enough.
And most of the locations just kind of look the same, right?
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of big empty stone rooms,
Yeah.
more or less, right? And so it's like, okay, even when the geography gets messed up and it's like, oh, we're somewhere where we already were. It's like, yeah, but the place that we ended up where we already were just kind of looks like everywhere else in this movie. So it like doesn't have as much impact.
And if you're not going to scare me, at least do something creative,
Right.
With the concept and like I mean, shit like Hellraiser 2, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a great movie, but does a lot of visually creative and interesting things with the labyrinth concept despite its low budget.
Right.
And this movie tries that in places, but it never goes far enough.
Yeah.
And this was the point where I just the movie just kind of lost me, which is back to back we get haunted piano, haunted telephone, haunted disgusting shit people, French guy Lataupe showing up, and ghost of a little kid.
Yes.
In 3 minutes?
Yes.
Back to back to back.
I agree. They don't set any of these things up well enough for them to be scary when they show up. And also all of them sort of are just one scene moments. And the haunted piano thing really pissed me off.
Yes.
Because there is a way to make this the exact thing that happens in this movie. There is a way to make this scary, and they fail so hard at it. Because what happens is they see this piano, and George says, I had a piano just like this when I was a kid. My brother and I used to play this exact song, and we could never finish it because the A4 key was fucking dead. And then he plays it, and of course the A4 key is dead. And I'm like, the reason that that's not scary is because before he plays the piano, 1 second before he plays the piano, he tells me exactly what I'm supposed to expect once he starts playing the piano.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, just have him do the melody first, get all freaked out, and then be like, what the fuck? And then later in the movie, have him drop the information about the A4 key being broken, or do it 10 minutes before. The worst possible option is doing it 1 second before, because I'm like, the A4 key's not going to work, obviously. Yeah. Like, duh. And so it loses all of the shock and just makes me feel like you, the movie, think I'm stupid. I'm stupid. I'm stupid. I'm stupid.
Yeah, you know what movie does the spooky piano scare better?
I know exactly what you're going to say, but I want you to say it.
Hell House LLC.
It is a severe indictment on the film As Above, So Below that Hell House LLC accomplishes this scare better. A movie that I would argue is in some ways worse than this movie, but not less scary. It's more scary, right? I think the acting in Hell House LLC is worse. I think some of the effects are worse. It has a lower budget. However, it accomplishes being frightening much better, which for two movies that are both ostensibly horror films is a pretty severe indictment on As Above, So Below.
And even when you're watching the scene in Hell House that sets up spooky piano,
yes,
you're like, I know that spooky piano is going to get paid off, and this is exactly how it's going to happen.
But crucially,
when that happens,
yes,
it works much better than it does here because there is an efficient setup and payoff of that scare.
And crucially, they give you time for the setup to be built up in your mind before the payoff. They don't introduce the creepy tune on the piano and then have a ghost play the creepy tune on the piano in the same scene. They give you some minutes between those two things happening, as opposed to this movie where it's like, oh, this creepy thing happens with a piano when I was a kid. Oh, wonder if that'll happen right now when I play. It's just like, it's like the people who made this movie don't understand how scares work. Yeah. Right? It's like they don't understand that scares need build-up. And I think that's true of all the scares in this movie, which is why none of them are frightening. Because every single scare is telegraphed like moments before the scare is delivered. And it's like, that's not how you do it.
Yeah.
That's objectively the wrong way to scare someone.
There's also the spooky phone ringing, and
Yeah.
then you see the telephone, which is so stupid.
Yeah. It is like briefly sort of an effectively eerie thing to hear a telephone ringing in the middle of the Paris catacombs where they've said that cell phones don't even work. Right.
Yeah.
And then they talk about how there's no phone lines down there and like there's no reason that a phone would be ringing. But then once you actually see the telephone, the scare is completely deflated. Just hearing the sound is like, ooh, that's kind of eerie and weird. And then it's like, hello, ghost phone? And I'm like, fuck off. And then, of course, it's her fucking dad.
Yeah.
Scarlett picks up the phone. It's her dad being like, I'm in here. Blah.
I'm gonna kill myself. Yeah, because she has everyone in this movie is experiencing trauma and guilt over people that they've killed, and the
or in Zed's case,
or allowed to die.
Yes, or in Zed's case, his son who he just doesn't see because he's a deadbeat.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
that's the little kid that's running around in this scene, right?
I think the little kid in this scene is George's brother who drowned.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the same kid that he then sees later under the fish tank glass covered with bones. I think that's what it is that it's his brother who he saw drown. Mm-hmm. I don't think Zed's kid ever shows up because that kid's not a ghost. He's just out and alive in Paris somewhere living with his mom, and Zed's just not paying his child support and never coming by. he's just exploring the catacombs.
Just hanging out with his mom, singing Frere Jacques, wondering where his dad is.
Yes, and presumably Zed
when is Papa going to come home, Mama?
And presumably Zed is dicking down Susie, the other his fellow cave explorer, instead of being a parent to his child.
So Lataupe shows up here, clearly looking like something's wrong with him.
He looks possessed, and then is like, follow me into the creepy caves.
And I'm going to sort of disappear around each corner and then reappear in a way that is not at all creepy.
And everybody's like, yeah,
this is a normal thing that is happening.
Let's follow this guy who's been missing for years after going into the evil tunnel and then just showed up with purely black eyes, mumbling like he's possessed by the devil. This seems like the guy who should be leading our expedition now. It's so insane that they're just like, okay, yeah, show us where to go.
So they go deeper into the catacombs down this this passage, and of course the rope fails at one point, and I think it's Benji slams into George.
Yes, Benji like falls down the rope a little bit, slams into George. He fucks up his hands. He gets rope burn, and hits George on the rope and shit. And then they have to like bandage up Benji's hands because they're all fucked up.
And then Taupe leads them through the catacombs of this lower level to a dead end with a spooky obelisk in it. And so we're going to have some more Indiana Jones puzzle solving.
Yes. You know how this movie does Indiana Jones puzzle solving? Word association games. There is literally, this one stuck out so much to me, but all of it is like this in this movie. This one was just especially ridiculous because basically there is a scarab carved on one of the rocks in this room. Mm-hmm. And literally what happens is Scarlett looks at it and goes, scarab, Egypt, pyramids, pharaohs. And then she's like, oh yeah, a Ptolemaic lever or whatever the fuck the thing is.
I looked it up. It's not real.
No,
the only thing that I could find, whatever they call it, like whatever they like this puzzle that they're solving.
Yeah.
Not a real thing.
No, it doesn't exist.
Everything I found was just linked back to this movie.
Yes, and it's just so insane that it's like she just starts saying words that are associated with a picture of a scarab and just guesses the right thing and then is like, oh, so it'll be the 8th rock because like it's the sun or whatever the fuck. And then George is like, oh, but if it was carved before the fucking 7th century, then it would be the 7th one because they thought that the Earth wasn't one of the planets or whatever the fuck. And it's just like,
that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
That part of the puzzle solving where they're talking about like the planets and stuff, that was kind of interesting, but I don't think the puzzle solving in this movie, again, in general, doesn't work because nothing's effectively set up for the audience. Like in Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah.
It clearly builds up to those puzzles, and when it gets to the end,
yes, And this fucking 7th rock instead of 8th rock is literally just rushed, stupid baby brain version of, in Hebrew, Jehovah is spelled with an I.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, just with no build-up and written by morons for an audience of imbeciles. Anyway, so she does the 7th rock and it fucking works, and it opens the secret chamber. And then inside the secret chamber, there is a he chose poorly ass motherfucker.
Yeah, there's the knight from the Last Crusade who finally decided it was time to just fucking die.
You know what pissed me off about this movie, especially this time? This guy never gets up and does anything.
And it's clearly an actor.
Yes.
It's like, because they're like, oh, he's so well preserved. That's weird.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at this guy laying on this table, waiting for him to get up.
And later when they go into Upside Down Hell World, they're in this room again, and it's like a decomposed zombie version of this same guy is on the slab. And I'm like, perfect time for that guy to get up and start fucking killing people with a sword. Doesn't happen. And I'm like, what are you fucking doing? Like, the scares that you are delivering, you're setting up 1 second before they happen. And then the scares that you would have an opportunity to deliver very successfully, like something happening with this Crusader zombie, you're just completely ignoring. It's like, come on! Like, there's a fucking zombie with a sword.
Oh, man,
have him do some shit.
This movie would rock if it was that they just went into the catacombs and they were just fighting off a bunch of Knights of the Crusade.
Yes,
zombies.
If this fucking
that'd be so
zombified
cool.
Crusader was hunting them one by one and decapitating them with his fucking sword, instant 2 stars higher than this movie is. Like, it's just so insane to just present that visual in this movie and then be like, yeah, but he's never gonna get up or do anything in this horror movie where there's fucking demons and shit. Like, it's so stupid. Anyway,
yeah. They swim. Some of the swimming in this is like sort of effective at being claustrophobic. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's they have to swim through these narrow passages.
Yeah.
And we're getting, of course, the first person view through the cameras. They make it to basically the treasure room. And there's this wall with like Egyptian hieroglyphics, and then like actual gold treasure locked behind a gate. And so, Lara Croft or whatever goes over to the fucking hieroglyphics and again starts playing these word association games trying to solve this shit.
She's like, oh, there's an ancient myth about the sun and the earth and how they were in love and shit. And she figures out that the Philosopher's Stone is not, in fact, in the fucking... Sorry, I was gonna say Chamber of Secrets. That's the second Harry Potter movie.
Where is it in the first one?
It's fucking... It's in like a secret forbidden...
Because they have the
There's like the 3-headed dog guarding
three-headed
it.
dog.
I don't remember how they get there though.
Yeah,
It's a secret part of Hogwarts where they fucking sneak in, and then there's the 3-headed dog.
It's like one
and,
of the upper levels or something.
I don't know.
I think.
Yeah.
It's not like
And then there's like a
and
plant
and they do the chess game
in this chess game. Yeah.
where Ron Weasley heroically sacrifices himself and
Yes.
just almost gets fucking killed.
Yes, by being good at chess. Anyway, it's not there.
It's not there. It's embedded in this wall. And is this when this is when she breaks it out?
Yeah, she
and
gets the Philosopher's Stone out, and she's like, "Hey, I got it." And then
And
she
then-
turns around, and she's basically like, "Oh, I just realized that treasure that all of my French friends who brought me down here is booby-trapped, and they're all about to die." Which it's like, again, she only cares about herself and her quest for this stone that her dad, who killed himself, spent his whole life trying to find. She could not give less of a shit about any of the other people she's here with.
It's not like this supernatural thing where the stone is possessing her.
No.
It's not like the end of Last Crusade where like Elsa and then Indy are both like really fixated on grabbing the Grail.
No, she's
like,
just selfish.
She's just a selfish, stupid bitch
Yes.
who lets all these French people die.
Yes.
Which, okay, there's worse things she could do.
But also she's British, so like, glass houses.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's booby trapped. They all get out of the way like just in time. They don't none of them die, but like the roof caves in or whatever.
I was expecting a boulder to roll down and chase them through the catacombs.
Yeah. And so basically there's like the room sort of caves in here, and I think, do they have to backtrack here? I don't remember exactly how they get into hell.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I think they go the floor breaks open during the cave in, and they all
they're like, oh, the only way out is down because
yeah.
the cave in has blocked the way they came in.
And Susie's like broken her arm in the cave in.
Oh my!
And then
so Susie has broken her arm in the cave in, and it is so fucking funny because her arm is like clearly mangled and fucked up. There is like a bunch of like blood and like wound makeup on it, and Scarlett runs up to her and goes, "Are you hurt?" And I'm like, do you have functioning eyeballs? It's so stupid.
This movie's R?
Yeah.
Could have gone harder.
Oh, yeah. The one and only good moment is the head smash that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
In terms of gore.
Yeah.
That's really that's all we have here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so she heals Susie's arm with the Philosopher's Stone.
Yes, by like grinding some dust off of it, like it's like a crack rock. I was like, I wonder what would happen if you like, because she like grinds off like some Philosopher's Stone dust and like sprinkles it on the wound and then covers it up for a second and then the wound is gone. And I'm like, I wonder what would happen if you sniffed that, if you just like did a rail of Philosopher's Stone dust. Do you think that's how Nicholas Flamel has eternal life? Is just by doing rails of Philosopher's Stone.
Tight. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna live for another 100 years or something.
By the way, I like when they're talking about the Flamel lore, and they're like, oh, then people dug up his grave to try and find the Philosopher's Stone.
God, that
and he
sounds
wasn't
like a fucking...
and he wasn't there. But then I love that his wife also wasn't there.
Yeah.
So him and his wife just ran off to live an immortal life together, and like. I love my wife, and I like to think no matter how many years on this earth I lived, our relationship would be solid and it would be great and everything. However, like, part of me is like, I don't necessarily know that relationships are meant for eternal life. I think one of the beautiful things about being in love with somebody is the fact that we are mortal and your time with them is precious and limited, right? And I'm like, are Nicholas Flamel and his immortal wife eventually gonna just decide, this isn't really working anymore,
Mrs. Flamel is just like, oh, so you think that you can get yourself eternal life and run off and fucking bang some whores for the rest of eternity?
I bet you're giving Sherry eternal life too, aren't you, you fucking asshole?
You're stuck with me forever, you son of a bitch!
I don't even want the Philosopher's Stone dust anymore. I'll fucking die. I'd rather die than be with you forever. Don't give that shit to your whore, Sherry.
There's also there's got to be a Dracula flow line in one of the upcoming Dracula flows that's about like snorting ground up Philosopher's Stone.
I'm doing rails of Philosopher's Stone like Flamel.
This shit ain't nothing to me, man. Did you ever watch those?
Yes, I did watch the Dracula flow on your recommendation.
Good.
And I was amused by them. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, she has a magical stone that can heal people now, which really just takes the rug out of any stakes that we have in this horror movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, now when someone gets hurt, it doesn't matter because they have a magic rock that will fix it.
Yeah, it's kind of like that thing that happens in Rise of Skywalker when suddenly Rey has force powers that can heal people.
Right. So it's like, okay. Guess it doesn't matter if anyone gets hurt now because it will be immediately undone.
This is when they introduce the as above so below concept in the movie. They sort of realize what's happening. Yeah,
there's like a thing on the wall that's like the as above so below symbol, and then when they go through the floor, it's like upside down. Mm-hmm. So they're like, oh, like this is weird, and it's another thing where they're in the same room but it's all reversed, which again, like, cool idea, meh in execution, like we talked about.
Yeah, and
then there's like a tunnel that they have to crawl through that has "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here" written above it, which is like from Dante's Inferno. It's like the inscription on the gates of hell. And that's sort of a cool moment and cool idea. I wish them exploring caves and finding hell was more of the movie, because this happens this is basically the beginning of the third act, is them going into hell. And I'm like, this should have been way earlier in the movie.
This moment of them crawling through the tunnel after reading that inscription is kind of claustrophobic, and it's one of the rare moments in this movie that is actually claustrophobic.
Yeah, and it's actually, again, I wasn't feeling very much, but again, my analytical horror watching brain was like, this is kind of creepy. They just saw an inscription. The inscription isn't gilded and fancy. It's carved into the stone in kind of a scrawled, janky manner, which I think is kind of cool for the inscription above the gates of hell. It's kind of a cool moment. And again, I was just like, this should be more of the movie.
And it's just really brief, and they don't do anything with it.
Yep.
They stumble into the treasure room again, but again, everything's upside down and reversed.
Yeah.
I pause this movie to get up and use the bathroom, and I wrote this note down. Because I looked at the timestamp when I paused it. We're an hour into this bitch.
Yeah.
And none of these fucking cunts have died yet.
Yes. Yeah.
And then immediately when I got back from the bathroom and pressed play, one of them did.
Yeah. So far at an hour, one person has gotten their hands fucking shredded on a rope, and then another person has had their fucking arm get an ouchie. By the way, Scarlett, as far as we ever see, does not use that stone on Benji's hands, which feels racist. Because Benji is the only black person in this entire group, and I'm like, what's that about? Why did Susie get the stone? And Benji doesn't get shit for his fucking rope-burned hands.
Yeah.
It's just gotta keep wearing gauze on him. Did they cut the scene where she healed his hands? Because I'm like, that feels very weird.
And I feel like at some point there are lines alluding to the possibility that she and Benji are a thing now.
Yeah.
But she just apparently doesn't give a shit about him.
No, yeah. Very weird that his injury is not addressed by her magic stone dust. But yes, so in the treasure room, is Latope in the treasure room, or is that a little
he's
later?
he's in a crypt.
Oh, yeah.
Because they go swimming again.
Right.
Because they got into the treasure room by swimming.
Yes.
So they swim
So they're
out,
trying to backtrack.
and they go through the crypt. I think it is the same crypt with the
Yes, he chose poorly ass night.
with the knight. But Latope is there this time, and then he just caves Susie's head in on the floor.
Yeah. The one and only jump scare that sort of worked for me in this movie, it didn't really scare me, but I was like, that was decently executed, is the second one with Latope, because the first one you're expecting, right? Mm-hmm. Where Susie goes up to him and tries to touch him and get him to respond.
Yeah, he's not totally catatonic at this point.
Catatonic, and they're calling to him and he's not responding at all. So she touches him and he stands up and freaks out. And that jump scare you totally see coming because they forecast it in a very obvious way. And then the second time she goes to touch him, you're thinking maybe they're going to subvert it because they just did the thing. But then the second one is the bigger jump scare where he grabs her and attacks her. The second one sort of worked for me because I'm like, they are giving you the opportunity to be like, maybe they'll do something different and not do the jump this time. And then they do the jump, which is a well-known and pretty decent way to execute a jump scare, is lull your audience into a sense of false security by being like, oh, we just got the scare. Mm-hmm. We won't get another one. And then hit them with another one. It's the best jump scare in a movie that doesn't really have any good jump scares, I think.
I don't think so. I think it was too easily telegraphed. And the other thing that they do with the jump scares in this movie that I really hate is they just make up an excuse for the camera to malfunction and cut in and out to make the jump scare more scary. Yeah. And I can't remember if they do it with this, but with the stone people that start attacking everyone.
Yes, the rock
they do
goblins.
that a shitload.
It's so stupid. And this movie is also a huge offender of one of the things that is sometimes very bad about found footage horror, which is thing there, look away, thing gone.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, okay, I have seen one horror movie before, ergo I know exactly what you're doing here, movie.
Yeah.
It's the oldest and most obvious trick in the book, and this movie does it 20 times. Anyway.
But so they start realizing that everything is like a mirror of what they've already gone through.
Yeah.
So at some point, like Benji gets separated, and he's trying to like backtrack his way through the catacombs.
Oh, by the way, when Susie gets her head smashed, which is like our only good moment of gore in this movie, Scarlett tries to heal Susie with the Philosopher's Stone, and it turns out it doesn't work on dead people. So I guess there's still maybe some stakes in this movie. But yeah, if you're just fucking already completely dead, healing for you.
If your head's been smashed like a watermelon.
Yes, and that's the only good moment of gore in this. It's like okay, but the camera fritzes out to cover the effect a little bit, which also sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Benji gets jump scared to death by Spooky Girl.
Yes.
In the tunnel that he's off in.
Yeah.
And this is the first moment of the first scare in this movie that I was like, that was sort of effective. Yeah. Is when his body fucking drops into the crypt and scares everyone, or into whatever room they are in the catacombs and scares everyone.
Yes, like he's one of those Harkonnens from the beginning of Dune 2 just falling like a bag of bricks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good. That was fun.
It was pretty good. Pretty good by this movie's standards, which are low. But yeah, so Benji is deceased, and everybody's like freaking the fuck out.
They start crawling through the catacombs more, and George sees his brother drowning under this like river of bones that's like it's sort of interesting, but the effect isn't very good.
No, because it literally just looks like he is on his hands and knees on top of a fish tank with a dead child floating in it. And it's like if there was a way with this movie's, because this movie has enough budget that they do some more flashy effects than this one. I'm like, if there was a way to make this, like maybe it's in one of the swimming sequences when he's actually in the water that he sees this or something. It's just like him just kind of being on his hands and knees on top of this like glass surface and just looking down and being like, oh no, that's my brother. It feels pretty lame to me. He also starts freaking out like, that's my brother down there, I have to help him. And it's like,
okay,
yeah,
fucking idiot.
He's been dead for several years. Also, you have aged into an adult man.
Yeah, and you just saw the one of the French girls that you met at the club, one of these French people that just showed up in this movie, get her head caved in by a guy that they also thought
and
was,
I think
it's just
I think one of the things
the other thing about found footage movies is for people that hate horror protagonists that make stupid decisions. Yeah, they're so bad in a lot of found footage.
Oh movies. Yeah, it's true.
They're just brainless morons.
Yeah, but sometimes that's what I like about found footage. Like I recommended on a past media rec Bobcat Goldthwait's Sasquatch found footage horror movie Willow Creek, and in that one the protagonists are dumb idiots who make terrible decisions.
But that's kind of the point.
And yeah, because they're sort of supposed to be like YouTube influencers. Yeah. And that movie I love because it's like, even though I'm watching these stupid people make bad decisions, the joy of watching this movie is just knowing that they are going to inevitably die as a result of these decisions. And like, I hate these people and want that to happen. Right. But this movie isn't taking that attitude. Like, it wants you to care about and like these people.
Yeah. I mean, it has some sense of fun with the ideas, but the movie's playing it pretty straight.
Yeah. Also, I think the whole thing with George is like, and him trying to save his brother or whatever, I think the movie's trying to be like, oh, the fucking hell dimension that they're in is like getting into his brain and like making him like irrational or whatever, which would be something if the movie did anything else with that ever again, but they don't. Right? Because it almost seems like a moment where he's like manic because he's like sort of possessed or delirious, right? And then he just snaps out of it and it never comes back. And I was like, well, that would be something if George kind of like went crazy down there. Mm-hmm. And then they had to deal with the fact that he was like being manipulated by like the forces of hell, like they were like twisting his brain or something. But it's like they don't, and that's not a thing. Anyway, so then they go around the corner and there's a car that's on fire.
Yeah. And again, they did shoot this in the catacombs, and they brought a car down into the catacombs and set it on fire.
And the visual of this looks okay.
Yeah.
It's one of the visual moments in this movie where it's like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And there's a ghost guy who's on fire in the car. And Le Papillon immediately sees the ghost guy. The ghost guy turns and looks at Le Papillon. And he's like, I'm sorry, it is not my fault. And I was like, okay, so this guy vehicular manslaughtered somebody. I understand.
And then he crawls into the car to try to save him, and then the car
the ghost guy grabs him. So
grabs
the
him.
forces of Ghost Dude start pulling Le Papillon towards the car, and Scarlet and George and Zed are all trying to hold him back, and he's like still skidding towards the car anyway, like he's being pulled by some invisible force. And then Ghost Guy, who's on fire, just jumps out of the car and grabs him and pulls him into the car, which is like not scary, but I was sort of like, oh, that's kind of a fun creative way to kill this character.
And then the car like folds up and like implodes on itself like the Titan sub.
And then his bare
just sticking out of the
bare
floor.
Calves, ankles, and feet are just sticking upside down out of the floor, and that is probably the moment of this movie that I like the most, because I'm like, that's weird, and I appreciate that it's weird.
I wish it had gotten weirder. Like, it's one of those that's like, it's kind of, again, analytically separated from any sort of emotional investment in the movie. I'm like, okay, that's kind of creative and fun, but the effect isn't very good.
Yeah.
I wish, like, the visual of his legs sticking up out of the floor, I wish there was a way to make that more horrific, because it just looks kind of goofy.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, let's go pull him out of the floor.
Yeah, which is insane and idiotic, because it's like a stone floor. It's like, no, he's clearly been dragged to hell. Like,
So this is the second jump scare in this movie that I thought was like effective, or moment of scare in general that I thought was effective. They're continuing to go through the catacombs, and then a figure just walks through the tunnel.
Yeah.
And, you know, that happens in a shitload of found footage movies. They even did it earlier with the spooky girl killing Benji. She walks by the tunnel that he's in first before she kills him. But there was something about, it's like a hooded figure, and in the specific shot that I'm talking about, I couldn't quite tell what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, it wasn't until later I realized it was a guy in a hood.
Yeah.
But it was just kind
like
of
a
this
fucked up face.
Yeah. It was just like this like black shape. It almost reminded me of like those guys in the Harkonnen arena in Dune 2. With the weird outfits. Just walks up in this hallway. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That was like something that I didn't know what I was looking at, which is like one of the cool things about found footage. Found footage is like the grain and looking into the darkness or looking into the woods and trying to see what's in there.
Yeah. You know what I just realized between those Harkonnen guys?
Yeah.
In the Harkonnen referee dudes that you were talking about in Dune 2, and also the Octoboss and all his minions in Furiosa. Big year for guys in entirely black, slightly S&M influenced outfits with horns on them. Because both of those looks in Dune 2 and in Furiosa, good looks.
Yeah.
You're speaking to the number one Octoboss fan.
I think there's a lot of people who would claim that title.
I think you
have some competition for number one Octoboss fan.
I only take orders from the Octoboss. Anyway, the figure walking by is not the Octoboss. It is a guy in a robe with a fucked up face. And then eventually, like, they go into a chamber and he's like there, and they're trying to like sneak by quietly because they're like, oh fuck. And then it like stands up and it's like, hello, I'm a demon.
Yeah, he's like on a throne. Is he Satan? Is he supposed to be Satan?
I don't fucking know. It would be nice if the movie made anything clear.
And then they get attacked by stone guys in the walls, looks like a Doctor Who, a Doctor Who weeping angel effect.
I cannot stress how much these fucking stone ghouls suck shit, and it is a huge detriment to the movie that this is the last scary thing that the characters encounter. Like, this is the final threat, is really bad, cheesy looking stone ghouls. Even a movie that we were talking about before, Neil Marshall's The Descent, has sort of goofy looking creature effects at times. There are times when those cave dweller ghouls in The Descent look like Buffy the Vampire Slayer Monster of the Week monsters. The difference is...
Or in my Letterboxd review, the orc in Two Towers that goes, why can't we have some meat?
They do look like that guy.
Love that guy.
Yeah, great guy. Great orc.
I got a lot of great orc voices.
We should if we ever do the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy on this podcast, we should do an orc ranking where it's like we should pick our top 10 orcs. or you could do an orc draft where like we have orcs to pick from and we go back and forth and draft our team of orcs.
I know that some of them have names. I just don't quite remember all of them.
I remember Ugluk and Grishnak. Which I think the guy who says why can't we have some meat is either Ugluk or Grishnak.
And then I know Shagrath is one of the ones in Orthanc in Return of the King when Frodo gets captured after Shelob. I think he's like the taller one. And not the one that's like, it's going to the Great Eye with everything else. And I know that his name is Shagrath because Shagrath is the stage name of the lead vocalist of Dimmu Borgir.
Hell yeah.
And black metal loves taking shit from Lord of the Rings.
They absolutely do. Almost as much as they love taking things from white supremacists.
Grishnak is the stage name of Varg from Burzum.
Yes. Count Grishnak,
Count Grishnak, yes.
You know what other orc's name I know from Lord of the Rings? The fucking super jacked Uruk-hai leader that duels Aragorn at the end of Fellowship. His name is Lurtz. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is a great name. Love Lurtz. Big fan of Lurtz. He's not canonical to the book. Aragorn doesn't have like a one-off duel with a giant jacked Uruk-hai in J.R.R. Tolkien's book, but it's an improvement in the film adaptation.
I like the orc in Return of the King that has in the Battle of Minas Tirith that has the skull on top of his head.
Yes, he's like wearing like a shrunken head on his head.
He's cool.
Yeah, he
great. Rocks.
I also love the one that has like all the fucking like he's got like a facial deformity or like disease. The general guy.
Yeah, he's the boss orc of that movie. Yeah, I don't remember his name, but he has a name too.
Anyway, that's probably enough about orcs. Anyway, my point about the descent being, even when those effects look cheesy, it looks better because it is shot on film. These are bad effects captured on bad digital cameras. And because it's like a cheesy looking effect on a kind of janky looking camera, it just doubles up on how little it works and how not scary it is.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, at least in The Descent, when one of those guys looks like a Buffy Monster of the Week monster, it is well lit. The use of shadows is effective. The way that Neil Marshall plays with the frame rate in that movie when those things are attacking makes things more frenetic and tense. Even if the thing I'm looking at isn't particularly frightening to me, the way the camera treats it becomes frightening. Whereas in this movie, it's basically like these stone guys pop out, and then pretty much the way that this movie handles them is the camera fritzes out for a second, and one of their faces is 2 inches from the lens.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
It just looks like shit.
It looks like shit. It looks like a bad...
silly.
It looks like a Halloween mask.
Yeah, they look like... they look very CGI.
Yeah.
They look like, like fantasy stone people.
Yeah.
That you would, in like a... on like a shit, like an old fantasy book cover or something.
Yeah. It's horseshit. One of them bites George on the neck. He's bleeding out.
George.
He's bleeding out and dying. I wish rest in peace, George. Spoiler alert: he doesn't.
Beloved character George,
who we know 2 things about. He has a brother who drowned, and he likes fixing church bells. Oh, sorry, 3 things about.
They also had a thing in Turkey
where he went to jail.
Yeah.
Yes, he went to a Turkish jail because of a British redhead who he's in love with.
Yeah.
That's all we know about George. And then he gets bit on the neck and starts bleeding out. And if this movie was interesting in any way, George would die, and it would just be Scarlet and Zed at the end. Because Zed is like the guy in the horror movie that you don't expect to survive. He's like random no-name guy on Papillon's crew, right? And so you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting that they're the 2 last ones left. It's like our protagonist and like some random guy who we thought was dead meat. But then George lives, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
You know? And then Zed just goes back to being the third wheel background guy.
Yeah, and then at some point here she realizes through, again, this insane lore
I'll tell you
that is never
exactly
explained.
I'll tell you exactly how she realizes, because it's fucking so stupid. George, as he's bleeding out from being bitten on the neck by a stone goblin, goes, "Vitriol!" And with the same amount of effort that he used to say vitriol, which starts off her word association train, where she's like, "Oh, vitriol, blah, blah, blah. I have to atone, da-da-da-da-da," right? Oh, I have to put the stone back. This is a fake stone. The real stone is in the hell dimension of the stone chamber.
Cannot pass beyond the Great Seal, for that is the boundary and the price of immortality. Because this movie is just the horror movie version of the last 30 minutes of Last Crusade.
That's true.
But shitty.
But with the same amount of effort that George said vitriol through choking on his own blood, that motherfucker could have just said fake stone and saved her all that fucking trouble, and also expedited his own healing, right? I'm like, this is so stupid. Yeah. It's so stupid to have him say this like fucking like obscure bullshit to her that she then has to parse out, instead of just saying the answer that he clearly already knows. But she figures that out, and she's like, "Oh, I have to return this stone to the chamber, and then I'll have the real one, because I'm in the flip-flopped hell dimension version of this room," right?
And she goes back up through like a blood river. That's kind of a cool visual.
Yeah, it's also the moment in the descent where the protagonist gets covered in blood.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same thing.
Oh,
again.
It's so much cooler in the descent.
It's way cooler in the descent, especially because she genocides an entire cave dweller family, and that's how she gets covered in blood in that, because she like kills the mama cave dweller and the baby cave dweller, and then she kills I don't know if it's the father cave dweller who she kills last, but while she's killing that family, like, that's when one of them drags her into the blood lake, and she comes out and she's like howls like one of the monsters, and it's like, oh, she's gone feral.
Yeah, that's pretty rad.
And it's a great moment in that.
What a good movie.
What a much better movie.
What an awesome movie. I should watch that again.
Yeah. Anyway,
and she finds her dad hanging, and she realizes that like
that what she has to atone for is
not picking up the phone when her dad killed himself.
It is infuriating when she like hugs her father's ghost hanging corpse and goes, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't pick up the phone that night." I'm like, this is bad film school writing. Like this is the same level as like it's because we lost the baby, isn't it? Right? It's that level of screenplay.
Yeah, but and you know what else?
Yeah.
She discovers that the real stone was within her all along.
What the
fucking hell?
She puts the stone back and is like, okay, the real stone should pop up.
The real
anytime.
stone was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, and her like sleeve wipes some dust off this fucking mirror, and it's like, the stone's right here, bitch. It's been you the whole time. And then it turns out to be incredibly literal, because now she just has magic healing powers.
Yeah, she just has healing powers like fucking Rey and
I am
Rise of
become
Skywalker.
Philosopher's Stone. Healer of George. Also, as she's going both to and from the stone room, these stone ghouls, who were set up as some kind of threat when they bit George and almost killed him, she is just one-punching. She becomes the Doom guy and just starts meleeing these fucking demons. And I'm like, okay, you told me I was supposed to be scared of these when one of them popped out of the wall and like almost killed a main character of this movie, and immediately undercut any threat that they pose to the narrative, because she just walks up to them and socks them in the face, and they immediately just fold.
She picked up a power-up. That's why.
Yeah,
she's unlocked God mode.
She switched the difficulty to easy.
She picked up the golden gun.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
She's just punching these guys in the face, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm a demon from hell, and you've discovered my one weakness: fists." Krav Maga. Oh no.
I'm a demon from hell.
And then they find a manhole cover in the floor,
Yeah.
and they open it up, and it's Paris, but upside down.
Yeah, they crawl out upside down, which is like sort of a fun and cool moment.
Yeah, but again, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then Zed just fucking walks away.
He
just fucking walks off.
And we glossed over it because we'd already mentioned it.
Yeah.
But when Scarlet rejoins them, she heals George, and then she's basically like, to get out of hell, we all have to atone for the thing that we're here feeling guilty about, and then we have to like take a leap of faith down this well, which is where they find the manhole cover, right? And so she's like, George, like, what do you have to atone for? And he's like, well, when my brother drowned in that cave, I told him I was going to get help, and then I didn't get help in time or whatever, so he feels responsible for his brother's death. And then Scarlet turns to Zed and is like, Zed, what do you have to atone for? And he's like, I never see my fucking kids. I hate that little bastard. It's just so funny that Scarlett's thing is like, I'm responsible for my father's suicide. George's thing is, I'm responsible for my traumatic sibling's death when we were both children. And Zed's thing is like, I accidentally got a lady pregnant and didn't want to deal with the consequences.
Piece of shit deadbeat dad.
I ain't paying no fucking child support.
What's the thing that you would have to atone for to get out of hell?
Sometimes when I'm in my office chair and my dog Jill is behind me, I accidentally back up my office chair's wheels over her tail, and she makes the saddest, most pained little
I've heard
squeak.
it. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You would
That's
have to
probably
atone
the
for
thing
that.
I'd have to atone for in hell. Yeah. What about you?
Jerked off in church a couple of times. We would go to communion.
Wait.
And then I would go to the bathroom after communion while everyone else is doing their thing. And I would jerk off and then I would go sit down.
And you were Catholic.
Yeah.
Did you ever do confession?
No.
Oh, I was going to say, did you ever tell a priest about that? But I guess not.
Yeah, I don't remember doing confession ever.
Oh, okay.
Just
opted out of that part.
I don't know. It wasn't like something my mom would force me to do. Maybe maybe she went to confession, but I don't know.
I don't know.
But yeah, definitely pulled pud in
the
holy
house
building.
of the Lord.
The house of the Lord.
Wow. Damn. So that's what you'd have to say out loud before you jump down that well and crawled out of a manhole cover.
Yeah, in Paris.
Anyway, yeah, so then Zed fucks off, and
then we get the more of that interview at the beginning, at the end.
And Scarlett's basically like, I'm a treasure hunter. They're setting me up as if I'm going to have more adventures, but this is the only movie that I'll ever be a part of. And then, yes.
Because it's doing the found footage trope that they do sometimes where, like, they show an extra clip from something that canonically happened in the beginning.
Right.
As, like, a way to leave the audience wanting, asking more questions or, like, oh, the trip was doomed from the start or something. And it's just like, they all just make it out of it and they go home.
You know what movie does that to great effect in a way that is haunting and makes the entire runtime of the movie up until that point more horrifying? The clip of the interview from way earlier in the movie. That Thai movie, The Medium, that I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Excellent use of earlier interview being placed at the end of the movie there. Really gets you thinking about everything that you just saw, really freaks you out. In this movie, falls like a fucking limp potato. Mm-hmm. Limp potato is what I just said.
It's a potato that is not erect.
A flaccid potato. A soggy French fry. Also, at one point before the end of the movie, Scarlett and George kissed, and he says that the week that they spent together in Turkey was the best week of his life, and it doesn't fucking matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's stupid.
Justus, is Lara Croft and the Sorcerer's Stone the best movie ever made?
No, it's not the greatest movie ever made either.
Greatest movie ever made. That's the name of the show.
Yeah.
It is 9:45 on a Saturday.
Yeah, we're recording late. It's a late record.
A very tiring day. So,
no, it's not the greatest movie ever made. I think we've made that abundantly clear. This movie sucks. I do sort of have a fun time watching it.
Yeah, did you have fun with it this time?
I had maybe more fun the first time I watched it because I was going in cold. This time I sort of knew all the weird and wacky shit that was going to happen in this movie. So I didn't have the like novelty of being like, what the fuck? The Philosopher's Stone's in this movie, Still had a fun time watching it though, because even though I think this movie is bad, I think it's sort of like charmingly bad in a way. Like, it's not necessarily like a so bad it's good movie for me, but it is kind of a movie where I'm like, this is like lazy and incompetent, but it's also like sort of creative. Like I have never seen another found footage horror movie that tries the things that this movie tries, despite the fact that this movie doesn't like fully commit to any of them and sort of fails at them at every turn pretty much. It's still sort of interesting to see a found footage horror movie that isn't just another haunted house or possession movie, you know? And this movie, to its credit, is neither of those things. So I think because of that, it's kind of like a fun little curio within the genre to be like, yeah, there's only one found footage horror movie that's set in the Paris catacombs and is about searching for the Philosopher's Stone and going to hell, you know? So it's unique in that regard, but it's not good. So no, it's not the greatest movie ever made. David is As Above, So Below, the greatest movie ever made.
No.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I didn't have fun with this.
Oh wow, okay.
I
can't blame you.
Yeah, I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
It has some fun ideas and some creative ideas that all fall flat on their face and aren't executed well because this movie doesn't commit. It doesn't commit to the found footage premise with breaking up all of the different camera perspectives. It doesn't commit to making an effectively atmospheric and claustrophobic and tense adventure through the Paris catacombs. It doesn't commit to having a fun and wacky and ridiculous and creative adventure element to it. And it doesn't create any, effective, hallucinatory, labyrinth visions and stuff that they run into down there.
Yeah.
I like the idea of them going deeper through this ever-changing structure, and that's how they get out of it. But again, like, if I want to do that, I'll watch Alien versus Predator,
Right.
which is not a good movie. Better than this.
Or watch a movie that I've recommended to you before, The Outwaters.
Yeah.
Which is basically another movie about going to a hallucinatory hell dimension that is done way better than this movie.
Yeah.
And is actually scary.
If you're gonna do wild swings like this movie tries, follow through on those wild swings.
Yeah.
And this just doesn't. And it ends up feeling just very cliched and boring as a result. I would love to see someone try this but better.
Like an adventure found footage horror movie.
Yeah, I would love to see someone give this another go. But I do not think As Above, So Below is the greatest movie ever made.
Yes, that's a double no from us on the podcast. This movie's bad. And
Probably the worst movie that we've talked about, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Even more so than like Friday the 13th, which I was not a fan of.
Yeah, but I think this is objectively a worse movie than Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
It's a stinker, like I said. But I picked it because I thought it would be fun to talk about, and it has been.
Yeah. Talk about the show, tweet about the show, tell your friends about the show, tell your fellow CIA Black Ops team that you knocked over South American dictatorships in the 80s about the show. And what do we talk about next week?
Next week, hopefully it will be a better movie than this week. We don't know because neither of us have seen it. We're going to be talking about Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, which has a positive reputation in the found footage horror fandom. That being said, so does As Above, So Below to some extent, so you never know what you're getting, but I'm hoping that both of our first watch of Gonjiam Haunted Asylum for next week's record will be a positive experience. Or maybe we'll be on here talking about another bad movie next week. We'll see.
Yeah, I have high hopes. I've heard good things about this.
Yeah.
And Asia in general, Korea, China, Japan, seems to be putting out some pretty fucked up horror movies.
Yeah,
so
lots
I
of
hope
good
that
horror
this is
movies
one of
coming out
those.
of Korea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. David, have you heard like some weird noises, some like ghostly whispering on our record today? I feel like I thought I heard a couple of things, but I'm probably just imagining stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably just the wind, honestly.
Yeah, we do have the window open.
We have the
and the
window
fan
open.
going.
It's hot. It's summer. Maybe the dogs were making a noise or something.
Yeah,
They've
I'm
been
sure
hanging
that's
out
what
with
it
us.
was. Anyway,
I
we
wouldn't
can
worry about it.
Yeah.
Until we see you next time, as always, we love you so much. And as always, again, later, dipshits.
As you heard, there are some strange and ominous sounds picked up in the audio of this recording. While the hosts don't acknowledge these phenomena on this episode, probably because they're too focused on laughing at their own jokes, the recordings that follow become even more unsettling as whoever, or whatever, is responsible for making these audio traces slowly makes its presence known to David and Justus. Until next time, I'm your host, Charlie Anwar, and this has been the greatest footage ever found.